The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Donald Trump came to office saying he was going to be a dictator on day one. The essence of dictatorship, defy the Constitution and laws. He's done that on day one. And we know when dictators come to power, they very seldom voluntarily relinquish that authority.
So I've been to a few events recently. The only topic of conversation right now in brown communities is, have you got a plan B? Where do we go? We are in a very dark place because if you accept the argument from the Trump administration that there's no due process for people, then what is to stop them from going after citizens and green card holders and political enemies?
It just does seem that now is the time to break glass, right? That it's not the time for politics as usual.
This is the world's richest man marauding with a chainsaw. Authoritarianism.
A chainsaw.
I mean,
the GOP is really at war with the government of the people.
This is a constitutional crisis.
Democracy is at risk. Donald Trump is a lawless, angry man. He thinks he should be king. He thinks he should do whatever he wants, regardless of the law.
So what if they win back the House by a narrow margin in 2026? Who cares? So much is going to be done in the interim. The party will be sort of out to lunch. There's so many agencies dismantled and so much damage done to America's reputation and possibly the economy that, oh, great, you won the House. I don't think Donald Trump cares.
Trump Derangement Syndrome, it's alive and well. It hasn't gone away. There they are. Their heads explode. Really what's happening is that Trump is fundamentally transforming their world. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us on today's show. You can get to the live video stream of this program at trumpetdaily.com or at the Rumble channel, rumble.com/Trumpet Daily. We're still getting some sporadic promotional efforts from Rumble, so we do appreciate them promoting this program. You can leave comments, of course, down below the video, or you can email the show, td@thetrumpet.com. So yesterday, Donald Trump, I guess he's still going to need some congressional support to finally and forever put to rest the Department of Education. Just started on a whim by Jimmy Carter, started by executive action. And here comes Donald Trump 45 years later, and by executive action says, that's it, it's over. $3 trillion later, $3 trillion. And meanwhile, we've seen test scores just plummet. Our young people, we're raising a generation of illiterates. That's what it amounts to. I mean, you applaud the effort of doing away with this big, bloated bureaucracy. You do applaud that. But then you look at some of the statistics, the numbers, and you see just how big of a problem this is, how deep it runs all through our society. Getting rid of an agency that nobody really can define. What does it even do? It protects us from segregation? Really? Don't we have a Department of Justice that can prevent that? So here's the Department of Education. $3 trillion over the past 45 years. And what has it produced? Our entire society is being dumbed down. As I say, a lot of graduates these days can barely read. This was Donald Trump yesterday announcing this historic action, as he put it, clip 8.
Today we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all.
Isn't it amazing that so much of his success here at home, domestically, it's determined really by what he's able to demolish. He's coming in like a wrecking ball. And you hear the crowd. I mean, and hats off to his people for organizing the scene here. I know the Democrat heads exploded over this, but there you've got a bunch of students, young people, sitting at little school desks, and Donald Trump announcing that we're doing away with the Department of Education. It shows you something about government in the United States. It's an industry for these people. It's a complex. And the reason Democrats are kicking and screaming is because it's been funded to the tune of $3 trillion. What does it do? Don't know. I don't know what it does. I just know the test scores keep plummeting. It's the $3 trillion and the power, the bureaucratic power, they don't want to part with it. They don't want to part with any of it. They don't want any cuts. Even though these same people were talking about making some really difficult cuts just 10, 15 years ago, but not anymore. No, in fact, they're threatening Elon Musk. They're blowing up his Tesla vehicles. They're vandalizing his showrooms. And they're being egged on by the talking heads. They're being egged on by the comedians that aren't so funny. Fox News says President Donald Trump signed an executive order Tuesday to scale down the Department of Education, a move that is expected to spur lawsuits challenging the directive and will likely require congressional approval. Of course, there's a no-name judge somewhere across the country, maybe in Hawaii, maybe San Francisco, maybe, I don't know, maybe up in North Dakota. There's a no-name judge, I'm sure he is hard at work, or she, to try to intervene to prevent the President of the United States from taking this action, from doing away with an agency that nobody can really define its purpose. Nobody. What does the Department of Education do? What do they actually do? Listen to Donald Trump. He's commenting here on Linda McMahon. She came in as the secretary over the Department of Education with basically one job, and that was to dismantle the department. This is clip 3.
And it sounds strange, doesn't it? Department of Education, we're going to eliminate it, and everybody knows it's right. And the Democrats know it's right, and I hope they're going to be voting for it because ultimately it may come before them, but everybody knows it's right, and we have to get our children educated. We're not doing well with the world of education in this country, and we haven't for a long time. And we're pleased to be joined today by the woman who I chose because she's an extraordinary person. And hopefully she will be our last Secretary of Education.
Hopefully she'll be the last one. This is her job. Demolish. Get in there and demolish. Roll back the fundamental transformation. I mean, this was something that President Reagan, he campaigned on. He promised to do that. He couldn't do it. Reagan got in there in the 1980s, and it was already this big bloated bureaucracy. Just a few years into it. And here it takes Donald Trump, the wrecking ball, to demolish this Barack Obama-led fundamental transformation. Of course, in the case of this agency, it predates Obama. It predates the dear leader. But what a perfect symbol of everything that's wrong with government. $3 trillion later, and horrible test scores to go with it. An illiterate generation to go with it. Here's your government. Here's your tax dollars at work. Doing what? Listen to this from Tim Walz. He's the one, in case you forgot, he was the running mate for Kamala. And he sees this. I mean, this is a bad sign. Doing away with this agency, that means we're going right back to the days of segregation. Clip 1.
And, of course, Donald Trump doesn't care. And I appreciate you showing that photo because it's so obscene that he would put a mock classroom. We all know he's never been in one. He wouldn't last for a minute. He's never done it. He's surrounding by people who know nothing about education. And they want to make this about bureaucracy and cutting. This is about children. This is about broadband access in their schools. This is about the research you were talking about, pedagogy, things that we learn. And then it's about the Civil Rights Department at the Department of Education that makes sure that we don't have a situation where a Ruby Bridges is escorted to school with police. And so we're back in an area where we can segregate.
Okay, so it's about, I guess we know it's about broadband internet access, and then the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Education that prevents segregation. Isn't there a Civil Rights Division in the DOJ? Linda McMahon brought this out at her press conference last night. I mean, can't the DOJ and some of these other huge, bloated government agencies look after civil rights and segregation? Of course they can, and they will. Nobody can clearly define what the Department of Education even does, including this man. He just throws things out there, segregation, internet access. All of these politicians, by the way, that are, I guess, going to have to vote on this at some point. Why would they send all of their kids in D.C. in the swamp to private schools? Why not send them to public schools? If the public schools are so great, you would think your elected representatives would be sending them to public, the kids that is. They don't. They don't. They know. It's like President Trump's right. Everybody knows. This is just big, bloated, ineffective bureaucracy. $3 trillion later. And the problem runs a lot deeper, as I'll show in just a moment. Listen to this from Jesse Waters last night, clip 12.
47's tearing down another pillar of liberalism. The Department of Education was started under Jimmy Carter, and it was supposed to make our kids smarter. 4 decades later, it's failed.
Caroline, what do you say to critics of the president's education plan?
Where was their criticism of our nation's failing test scores for the last several decades? The Department of Education was founded in the 1970s, and since then we have spent more than $3 trillion at this federal bureaucracy. What has been the return on that investment for the American taxpayer? Levels that are less than ideal, less than proficient. Our children's test scores are incredibly concerning when it comes to reading rates, literacy rates, math, and science test scores. The numbers prove that.
We're spending $250 billion a year, and as Bush said, is our children learning? We're spending more money than we did in the 70s, but reading scores are lower now than they were in the 70s. A third of America's students can barely read. 8th grade reading just hit its lowest level ever. College kids can't pass simple civics exams.
I mean, these are devastating numbers. And just the inability to admit, hey, we got it wrong. We can't even admit failure. I mean, Jesse does there. It's failed. It's failed, and you've got Tim Walz and so many, because it's a pillar of liberalism. That's what it amounts to. Just keep spending trillions and tell people it's about internet access. It's to prevent segregation. It's worked so well. No, it hasn't. It's been a disaster. It's been a failure on every level. Listen again to Jesse, clip 13.
Our education system's broken, and it's been like that for a while. Here's Steve Jobs.
If you ask who are the customers of education, the customers are the parents. Not even the students, but the parents. The problem that we have in this country is that the customers went away. The customers stopped paying attention to their schools for the most part. Mothers started working, and they didn't have time to spend at PTA meetings and watching their kids' school. Schools became much more institutionalized, and parents spent less and less and less time involved in their kids' education. And what happens when a customer goes away and a monopoly gets control, which is what's happened in our country, is that the service level almost always goes down.
That's coming from someone who wasn't necessarily known as a great family man, the late Steve Jobs, pointing out what should be common sense, obvious. The family breakdown. That's the leading cause of why the test scores have plummeted. Yes, the government, the bloated bureaucracy has made matters worse by fighting against what parents are left. Fighting for woke policies enforced by a government agency, trying to suppress dissent, as we saw in Loudoun County, and, well, you know the news from a few years ago. Just horrific stories. Transgender, rape, all these things going on at your local high school or middle school. And promoted, actively promoted by the federal government. But before all of that, the family breakdown, that's what it always comes down to. Herbert Armstrong said that the foundational bulwark of any stable society is the nuclear family. Education starts at home. That's certainly what God's church teaches. And then you have, and they're small schools, but they're going to be replicated all over the earth in the world tomorrow. Our Imperial Academy and, of course, Armstrong College, where there's not just family involvement, but involvement from instructors as well, teachers and their wives and their children. This is a family atmosphere at God's college. I try to remind the students of this regularly. It's a blessing. It's not like the world around us, where you're hard-pressed to just find a family that's intact. This is from I think it's the old child rearing booklet, where it says the very first form of government which the child comes in contact is the government within the home. If there's no authority, no government in the home, how can the parents expect their children to respect the authorities and governments in the society? It all starts in the home. I mean, this is the first form of government that a little squirming infant comes into contact with. And so that's a serious and weighty responsibility to train up that child in the way that he should go, like it says in Proverbs 22. That's not happening today. And many parents, embarrassed and ashamed, they're happy for the $3 trillion to go toward the public school and to pretend that everything's great at the public school and that they just don't have time for the PTA meetings and such. They don't have time to go to the children's baseball game, whatever it is. This article Mr. Armstrong wrote in 1982, he said it's about emotional maturity. He said it's not something to be learned about by college graduates. It's something that ought to be taught in the first grade and taught to 4, 6, and 8-year-olds in the home, how to control their emotions. It says here, it is the technical art of putting into practice the 10 Commandments. It's the real secret to human happiness. Teaching them obedience. Giving them contact with a righteous government. I've been amazed in going through the Gospels. Well, there was the whole sermon in Matthew 18 where Jesus took a little child and put him right in the midst of the disciples. And he said, this was obviously a well-mannered, obedient little child, because Christ said, of such is the kingdom of God. And then there were other instances where, parents would bring their little children, infants, to Jesus, and Jesus would take them up into his arms. And the disciples wanted to shoo them away. Even then, even 2,000 years ago, there was this satanic push to just keep the children out of it. Send them off into a corner. Whereas Jesus said, no, I'm going to pick them up into my arms and I'm going to teach you that this is how we are to become if we're going to make it into God's kingdom. We have to become as a little, humble, obedient child that just looks to his parents, looks to his father as the final authority, total faith and trust. That's the way it should be in God's family. But see, Satan understands this. This is God's purpose and plan. He's reproducing himself through family. And so Satan conspires against marriage, against family, against child rearing, against the father's role, all of it. And here's where we are some 45 years on from Jimmy Carter starting the Department of Education with all of these great intentions. We're going to make it, our children are going to be so educated by the time this is all said and done. Well, look at what happened. It's not like it's Carter's fault. But government certainly didn't fix what was wrong. It didn't correct the problem with the family. You know, I don't know who this reporter was, but outside of the Department of Education last night with Linda McMahon, he basically says, okay, the Department of Education is over, it's ended. But you know, how do we fix the family breakdown? And notice how she responds. Clip 15.
Donald Trump wants to send education back to the states. Education originally, but it begins in the home with the nuclear family, and the nuclear family in this country has been decimated. We got a fatherless crisis going on in this country. Far too many kids are growing up without a father, and all the statistics show that kids that grow up with a father in the home do far better in education. So I think if we can strengthen our nuclear families again in this country, that would really help the Department of Education or the education in this country.
Well, unfortunately, I can't do anything about reestablishing the nuclear family. I would hope that we would see more of that happen because statistics really do support exactly what you've said. Nuclear families are key. And when you've had parental involvement in children's education and how they're growing up, we see those results.
So everybody knows the statistics. But then the same authorities say what she said right there. Again, nothing against her. But unfortunately, I can't do anything to reestablish the nuclear family, the traditional family, the biblically defined family. I can't do anything. And so we've witnessed a total breakdown of family right across society. Read the first few verses of Isaiah 3. Isaiah 1, of course, talks about the sickness. I mean, the Bible talks about a young man leaving his father and mother and joining himself to his bride and vice versa so that they can become one family. Of course, there's more to the oneness than just that one family institution. There's a one mind, there's a one spirit, there's even a one flesh to this. And Satan wants to rip it apart. He wants to split it up. He knows that a kingdom divided cannot stand. He knows this. Jesus taught it. You have to have unity. You have to have togetherness if there's going to be peace. And I mean, this comes back to what we've been hammering away at all week with respect to geopolitical affairs. There's so much division everywhere. In the world, in our nations, in communities, in our cities, in our congregations, in our households. Why does the Bible talk so much about marriage, family, children, households, unity, peace? Because God is a family. God is a united family where He is our loving Father. He guides and directs the family and maintains peace and order. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 14, let all things be done decently and in order. And that's the way God runs His family. That's why there's peace on this campus, because God's family government's here. Now, we're all flawed human beings and we do make mistakes. We can trip up. But thank God for his government. Thank God for his family. Here, Jesus Christ came to this earth 2,000 years ago, actively promoting family, taking children up into his arms, taking on women that helped with his entourage as they traveled through, the Galilean region and Judea and Jerusalem. He was a family builder. I may have mentioned yesterday, I forget, it was, if not then, it was in my class Wednesday, but Mary and Martha, and just how they were grieving over the death of their beloved Lazarus, and the scriptures relate that Jesus loved them, and they loved Jesus. The ladies got a little bit agitated because Christ took his time getting there. And Lazarus had been dead and buried, I guess, for 3-4 days. Christ raised him to life. Christ said, I am the resurrection. I am the life. Just look to me. We need to look to God. We need to look to God and his family. We need to look to God and what he's building. Of such is the kingdom of God. What did Jesus mean by that in Matthew 18? He was pointing to a little child. And the scene, as it's described there, indicates that child was just standing there in the midst of the disciples for, I don't know, at least several minutes. Maybe 20, 30 minutes, who knows? Christ used the little child as a visual aid. This is what I'm talking about. When I talk about children, when I talk about looking to the Father, when I talk about my Father and me, how we're one, here's what I want you to understand. God is a family. To think about education in the world tomorrow, when it's headed up by God's family, when there's 100% family involvement, not $3 trillion just thrown to the wind, but a family operation where families are actually taking on those responsibilities from the start when they have a little infant in a cradle, looking after that child and then sending them off to school at about 6 years of age. I mean, 6 years, that's a long time. And one of the primary objectives for a father and a mother is to get that little child ready for school, ready to be able to listen to the master, the instructor, the teacher, responsive to government in a respectful, supportive way. 6 years, I mean, as the twig is bent, you're primarily getting your child ready to be attentive and respectful and obedient at school. All of those habits are well established, or at least they should be, before that little one ventures off to kindergarten. The aim for godly parents is to produce a child like the one Christ picked up and set right in the middle of the disciples. Imagine if that child was screaming and kicking. I don't want to stand here. I want to go play. I want to do my own thing. There's a lot of kids like that today. That would have, I think, undermined the lesson that Jesus was trying to teach his disciples. Here again, even the ones that were infants that he took up into his arms, at least there's no indication in Scripture that they were kicking and screaming and scratching and clawing. Jesus took them up into his arms, and he said, of such is the kingdom of God. When we come back, we'll get into, well, there's more anti-Trump injunctions. The radical activist judges, they are hard at work trying to disrupt this administration, trying to prevent it from going forward. It's turning out to be quite the fight. Speaking of division and strife, there's plenty of it all across our society. We'll get to that and more when we come back. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We'll be right back.
Daily News. Bible prophecy. See the connection on the Trumpet Daily. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the flood of news and information? You need something to sift the news and bring you only what matters most. You need the Trumpet Daily. You also need something to help you understand not just what's happening now, but what will happen next. You need the Trumpet Daily. Only the Trumpet Daily accurately matches daily news to precise Bible prophecies. Because Bible prophecy is the only tool up to the task of sifting the news down to what's important and showing you what will happen next. Join host Stephen Flurry every weekday. Go to trumpetdaily.com.
The German automobile company Volkswagen said on March 12th that it is willing to consider building equipment for the German military as part of Europe's efforts to rearm. According to economists, automotive factories can spare the capacity for defense because Germany's car exports have halved since before the pandemic. During World War II, Volkswagen shifted to manufacturing military vehicles and armaments. Almost 90 years later, Volkswagen seems to be returning to the war track. The company's statement came after Germany announced it would amend its constitution to remove spending limits on defense, essentially allowing it to rack up an unlimited amount of debt to fund its military. The European Union also announced an €800 billion boost to defense. After Germany's defeat in World War II in 1945, the late educator and religious leader Herbert W. Armstrong warned that the country would use its cutting-edge, world-class industry to remilitarize and prepare for Round 3. History and recent events have proved this forecast was accurate. To learn more, read Stoking the Furnace of the War Machine in our free booklet, He Was Right. Polish President Andrzej Duda called on the United States to move its nuclear weapons to Poland in an interview published March 13th. Duda said these weapons could help deter Russia. He pointed out how Russia moved nuclear weapons to Belarus in 2023 and that it would take decades for Warsaw to build its own arsenal. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said last week that the profound change of American geopolitics should cause Warsaw to explore opportunities related to nuclear weapons. This comes as Tusk announced a plan to require all adult males have military training. Germany, which virtually controls Poland, is splitting from the US. Bible prophecy warns that a German-led Europe will betray and destroy America. Stationing more American nuclear weapons in Europe would prove detrimental to the US. To learn more, read our free booklet, Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. The Center for Strategic and International Studies confirmed in a report this month that China now has the largest navy in the world in number of vessels. China accounts for 53.3% of global shipbuilding output, dwarfing America's 0.1%. China's policy of military-civil fusion is a major component of its naval development. It has blurred the lines between its commercial and defense industries. This allows the Navy to use commercial infrastructure, innovation, and investment to rapidly grow its military power. Every Chinese civilian ship is built to meet military specifications, extending China's naval capabilities far beyond reported numbers. Its massive fleet of civilian ships is a navy in waiting. To understand where China's growing power is leading, read Trumpet Editor-in-Chief Gerald Flurry's article, China is Steering the World Toward War. To learn more about current world news and how it relates to Bible prophecy, please visit thetrumpet.com.
Federal Judge James Boasberg says the Trump administration is evading its obligations after the Justice Department missed a noon deadline yesterday to privately give more details regarding those deportation flights to El Salvador. Boasberg says instead of giving the information he wanted, the government gave a 6-paragraph declaration from an Immigration and Customs Enforcement office in Texas. The declaration notified the court that cabinet secretaries are considering whether to invoke state secrets privilege, which allows the government to withhold certain information because of national security concerns. Boasberg called that response, quote, woefully insufficient, adding, to begin, the government cannot proffer a regional ICE official to attest to cabinet-level discussions of the state secrets privilege. Boasberg wants the DOJ to answer several questions, including what time the planes took off from the U.S. and how many migrants were removed via the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. President Trump is now calling on the Supreme Court to step in, saying unlawful nationwide injunctions by radical left judges could very well lead to the destruction of our country.
President Boasberg wants answers. Oh, yes, he does. He wants President Trump to answer. How many are on these planes that you're deporting? Who are they? When did the flights leave? President Boasberg is insisting that the government fall in line with his views, with his ideology. He's part of the resistance, you see. And there's a lot more like him. There's something like, 680 or 90 federal judges at the district level right across the country. So far, if you look at just the first term of President Trump, the injunctions that were leveled against him, 64, which was more than Bush, Obama, and Biden combined. So everybody can see. It's just like the Department of Education. Everybody can see what's going on here. And thus far, we're just, 2 months into his second term? And there's something like 15 or 16 injunctions already? A federal judge has told Donald Trump that he can't fire federal employees. How does this happen? A federal judge has demanded that Donald Trump spend U.S. aid money irresponsibly. You must spend. You must waste. You must just send it to the wind. Yeah, a judge made that ruling. A judge has said that he can't deport foreign terrorists. Judge Boasberg, President Boasberg. A judge has said that he can't revoke federal grants. Can't do it. You don't have the power. I know you're duly elected. 74 million Americans voted for you. But you don't have the power. You don't have as much power as I do. These judges, these are crackpot judges. Part of the resistance. You do wonder, where in the world is the Supreme Court? Well, Judge Roberts, for his part, he's too busy correcting, openly rebuking President Trump for daring to criticize these activist judges. There's a judge that said President Trump can't put trans women, that would be men, into men's prisons. Right, if you're a transgender, if you're a man, but you say I'm a woman, well, I guess you're supposed to go to a woman's prison. This is Sodom and Gomorrah. A federal judge now says that Trump can't prohibit transgenders from being in the military. Got to let them in. Whether they're women that dress like men or men that dress like, you've got to let them into the U.S. military. Activist judges who are part of the resistance. Fox News says federal judge blocks Trump's transgender military executive order. Politico, judge bars Trump's EPA from taking back $20 billion in climate grants. You can't take back money. Look, once you spend it once you throw it wildly to the wind, you have to keep doing it. That's the way these judges are reasoning. If Judge Roberts wasn't conflicted somehow, some way, he would have put a stop to this already. Real clear, it says, fortunately for Roberts, there's something he can do to actually help the judiciary regain credibility in the eyes of the public. He must expedite the Supreme Court's review and overturning of outrageous lower court decisions that are based less in law than they are in paroxysms of frothing Trump hatred. That's all it is. Frothing Trump hatred. And you see it. You see it in Boasberg's family. It is true, as is often now said, that we are in the throes of a constitutional or legal crisis. It isn't just coming from the direction those claiming as much think it is. The true crisis is coming from an unhinged lower court judicial insurrection. It's an insurrection. And you would think Roberts would be calling everyone into work. Let's put a stop to this. You know, you would think that Congress, they're on vacation right now. Ron DeSantis made this point at some kind of convention yesterday. You look at the blitzkrieg pace of Donald Trump's administration, they're not exactly matching that in the Supreme Court or in Congress. Let's just put it that way. What if congressional leaders were as zealous as the Trump people have been these first 2 months? They have the power, they control the strings of the purse, the power of the purse. You just cut off funding to some of these federal courts or to some of these deranged left-wing wokist policies or agendas. You put a stop to it right there. But they don't have the courage or even the work ethic to get it done. It's too much fighting, too much division. Trump is fighting a cartel of vile, corrupt, and far-left judges trying to kill his campaign promises. That's from Miranda Devine at the New York Post. If you ever doubted that Washington's corrupt cartel of Democratic law firms, judges, NGOs, and deep state bureaucrats is a machine designed to thwart the Trump administration, just watch as judge after judge blocks the president's ability to keep his campaign promises. Just blocking his ability to function. Grind it to a halt. Yeah, we need to resist. You heard it in the cold open. Chris Hayes there saying now's the time to break glass. This is not the time for a peaceful protest. We need to have an uprising. They're going to get one eventually. They're going to trigger one eventually. You're getting a little bit of a snapshot into it just with the reaction to Elon Musk and Tesla with respect to Congress and its inability to act. This was that statement from Ron DeSantis, clip 6.
If you look at how our government, not just on immigration, on everything, how our constitutional system has really been transfigured in a bad way over many, many decades, the root of the problem is Congress's fecklessness. The reason why you have so much debt, continuing resolutions, a massive bureaucracy run amok, because Congress doesn't use the power of the purse to rein it in. The reason why you have these judges doing what they're doing, because Congress has not used the authority in the Constitution to take political issues away from the courts and make sure that that's reserved in the executive branch.
Congress could put a stop to it. The Supreme Court could. But his point is, why hope that the Supreme Court will act when Congress has authority to defund and to impeach? They have the power, but they won't use it. So we get another round of gridlock. We're used to this, aren't we? Listen again to DeSantis from yesterday, clip 7.
You have the Trump administration has gone 100 miles a minute on all this stuff. Everything but the kitchen sink to move the country in the right direction. Congress is like almost the opposite. Like they're on a 2-week vacation right now. They haven't voted to codify. They haven't successfully codified a single executive order. We were talking about the border wall. They just passed a continuing resolution, Republicans' votes, that did not provide 1 cent for the border wall. It was just a continuation of Biden's spending from last year. That's all it was. USAID, they go on cable news. Oh, this is so bad. And yet they voted to fully fund AID. Now, President Trump's not going to probably allow some of these grants to go out, which is great. But why wouldn't Congress at least do that?
We made this point when we were talking about the continuing resolution. Just the same budget that they had under Biden. No changes. Never mind what Elon Musk reveals or discovers. Never mind the fraud, the corruption, the waste. Just keep on spending. That's the congressional way. Keep sending the trillions. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, that's pretty astounding to hear him say that none of these executive actions have been codified into law by Congress. Well, there's a Republican majority there, last time I checked. What is going on? How could anyone view this as I know there's plenty of people that are hardcore MAGA saying this is the solution to all the problems we've had for decades. I mean, look at what he's doing. He's getting rid of the Department of Education. It's just scratching the surface, though. That's the thing. What we're seeing really is that sickness being revealed, that Isaiah 1 sickness. And this was a lot of the reason my father kept saying, Donald Trump is coming back. It's prophesied. He has to. He's got to expose this evil. And of course, there's a temporary resurgence to go with it. But look at the resistance. Look at what's been exposed. This Miranda Devine piece, it says, it may not be brown paper bags changing hands, but this lawfare that defies the people's will is every bit as corrupt. They're gangsters. That's what Kash Patel wrote in his book. They're government gangsters. It says it will be up to the Supreme Court to define limits of presidential authority, but Chief Justice John Roberts' preemptive scolding of Trump for musing about judicial impeachment doesn't bode well for the president. Yeah, that's right. I mean, Roberts looks more and more like he's part of the resistance. And judging by Amy Coney Barrett's response to President Trump's congressional address a couple weeks back, she didn't look like she was overjoyed to see Orange Hitler, even though Orange Hitler appointed her, nominated her. We'll see. Amos 7 suggests that he gets some favor from the Supreme Court, from the Kingdom's Court, but maybe he already got it with those rulings last year that prevented them from stealing another election. We'll see what happens going forward. It's a bold, ambitious agenda, and there's plenty of low-level, radical activist judges prepared to stand in the way. This article from the Independent says, let this be a warning. Attorney General announces severe charges over Tesla attacks. So the attacks continue. They're being encouraged, promoted by the radical left. Electric vehicles, of all things. Pam Bondi announced that the Justice Department is bringing severe charges against 3 individuals accused of targeting Teslas with arson attacks. A few days ago, President Trump said that he considers these attacks on Tesla properties as terrorism. Well, he's right about this as well. Clip 9.
Do you consider what's happening an act of domestic political terrorism against one of your allies?
So Elon is a patriot. And again, I hardly knew Elon until the, election. And he turned out that he liked me better than he liked these radical lunatics that were in it, better than Kamala, better than Joe, because he's an intelligent person. And he backed me, and he went. And he got very much involved. He thought he actually would go around saying, if Trump doesn't win, our country is over.
But do you consider this an act of domestic terrorism?
I think so.
Why?
I think that if and when they catch the people, and I hope they do, the good thing is they have a lot of cameras in those places, and they've caught some already having to do with that. I think that you will find out that they're paid by people that are very highly political on the left.
He's right. It's carefully planned and coordinated. I mean, Chuck Schumer said as much yesterday in a remark. that we're organizing, the resistance. We're going to send them around to Republican town halls. We want confrontation. Listen to this bit from Jesse Waters on Democrat terrorism, clip 10.
A couple weeks ago, Democrats were blaming Trump for the stock market going down, and now they're rooting for a crash.
Tesla stock is way down, almost disastrously so. People have been vandalizing Tesla vehicles, new Tesla vehicles. Please don't vandalize. Don't ever vandalize Tesla vehicles. And so...
Yeah, now they're winking and nodding domestic terrorism. Don't torch a Tesla dealership. One never-Trumper said, kill Tesla, save the country. Then hackers released the names and addresses of Tesla owners across America. They said they'll take your name off the website if you give them proof you sold your car.
Pam Bondi should turn this into the largest investigation in the history of the DOJ. That's what should happen. Here they are laughing and joking about vandalism, violence, just like they did in 2020, and they got away with it. They got away with a wrist slap. That's it. And something like 50 people were murdered that summer. Cities going up in flames. We've spent a lot of time this week talking about the way of peace and how that we just don't know the way. It's a chilling article by Brendan O'Neill, who has looked into the investigation into October 7. We're still learning details about this coordinated, well-planned attack on Jews, the mass murder of Jews, happening in our century, our modern times. They reduced Jews to ashes, it says. In 2023, a fascist army burnt Jews to death. He names these three that were in this kibbutz. It says they were in their home, southern Israel, on October 7, 2023, when the unit of anti-Semites showed up. The gunmen saw the Jews through the window, so they set fire to the house. It burned at such a scorching temperature that when the Israeli authorities finally went in, they found not one trace of the couple's bodies. It took archaeologists. They had to bring in archaeologists. It took them 3 weeks of sifting through the soot to discover a sliver of bone. It was DNA tested. It was them. They burned them alive. It says it's the 21st century, and we're searching among ash for the remains of Jews. Following decades of the cry, never again, humanity once more found itself foraging in the blackened remains of a building for the incinerated remnants of the Jews who lived there. Further on, it says about this October 7 report that it's a horrifying but essential document. It bears witness in grim, meticulous detail to the carnival of anti-Semitic violence carried out by Hamas and its allies on 7 October. It is a forensic account, over 300 pages, of every crime committed by those armies of anti-Semites on that darkest day. So as I say, we're still learning details about this horrific attack, this mass murder of Jews, in this case, just incinerating Jews inside their homes, happening in 2023, after the cries of never again following the nightmare of the Holocaust. Is history repeating itself? Well, as I say, we've talked a lot this week about the way of peace. There is a way, but you have to get back to the teachings of Jesus. You have to get back to family living. You have to get back to putting that little child right in the midst of the classroom, and then teaching students, disciples, Christians, followers of Christ. Of such is the kingdom of God, God's kingdom. God's kingdom. That's one of the very first things that we pray for every day, as is brought out in those beautiful prayer outlines in Matthew 6. and Luke 11. We have a wonderful booklet on prayer, how to pray. If you're interested, it's a great jolt to get you on your knees and into contact with the great Creator God. That's all we have time for on today's show, the fastest moving hour in broadcasting. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We thank you for joining us today. We thank you for joining us all week, and we'll see you next time.